I live in a small 3-story building on a very quiet street. There are few apartments per floor, and as I work at night and get home always around 2:30 a.m., I end up noticing things that most neighbors probably never notice. It was about 2 weeks ago that I began to notice something strange. The light in the apartment room next to mine turned on every day at exactly 3:17 in the morning. I know because, out of habit, I look at the clock when I arrive, put something to eat, and I'm usually getting ready to sleep at this time. But this light, she turned on with a very strange punctuality. At first I didn't even care. I thought it could be a sleepless neighbor or someone with the same habit as me, or even an automatic timer, I don't know. But the problem is that that apartment was empty since the previous resident moved, something a month before it started. There was no one there. The door was never opened. I didn't hear any noise coming from there, and no one was seen entering or leaving. Even so, every day, exactly at 3:17 a.m., that weak yellow light turned on for about 40 minutes and then went out by itself. And the more I noticed, the more discomfort it began to cause me. After a few days watching this happen, I decided to comment with the syndic of the building. I asked very casually if someone new had moved to 203, the apartment next door. She looked at me a little confused and replied no, that it was still empty, and that they had even shown the property to some interested parties, but nothing closed. That's when I started to get 1 foot behind. If no one had the key, and the light was on every day at the same time, then who was inside? I decided to record with my cell phone one of these nights, just to have something on hand in case I needed it. In the video I made that night, the light really turns on at 3:17 a.m. sharp. But the strange thing is that, in the reflection of the glass, you can see something moving inside the room. I couldn't tell what it was. It looked like a dark figure, as if someone was walking from one side to the other. I paused the video several times trying to understand what I had seen, but every time I looked again, I felt a chill down my spine. The apartment was empty. I was sure of that. So why did it look like someone was inside, moving, as if expecting something? The next night, I put the cell phone back in the window, but this time I left it recording with the flashlight on, discreetly pointed at the glass of the apartment next door. When I reviewed the recording the next day, my breathing slowed. At 3:17 a.m., the light turned on as usual, but a few seconds later, the figure appeared again. Only this time it stopped. He stopped exactly in front of my window, as if he knew he was being watched. The outline was almost human, but there was something wrong. It was too long, the shoulders were crooked, and the face had no face. It was not possible to see any trace. Just a blur. I deleted the video at the same time, taken by an irrational panic. I tried to sleep, but I spent the rest of the night turning from one side to the other, with the feeling that something was wrong in the air. The next morning, I went to the door of 203, rang the bell. I put my ear on the door and was silent for a few seconds. And that's when I heard something that made me freeze, someone whispering 3 and 17, 3 and 17, repeatedly, very quietly like a song. The sound came from inside. I went back to my apartment with my heart racing, trying to understand if that was some kind of very bad joke or if I was really going crazy. I thought about calling the concierge, but I didn't even know what to say. Hi, is there anyone repeating a bizarre schedule inside an empty apartment? Who would take me seriously? In the end, I just locked the door well and left all the lights on, even though it was already morning. I spent the day half in the air, thinking about every detail, every noise, trying to remember if at some point I could have confused things. At night, I did something that I don't recommend to anyone. I set the alarm clock for 3:15 a.m. and left the cell phone recording again, but this time I positioned the camera outside the window, hidden in the corner of the curtain. I forced myself to sleep early, and when the alarm rang, I woke up in fright, with my heart hammering in my chest. I waited 2 minutes, and at 3:17 a.m. sharp, the light turned on once again. But this time, even before looking at my cell phone, I saw it with my own eyes. The figure was there. Stop. Staring at me. Or at least, he seemed to face me. Because he had no eyes. I was paralyzed for a few seconds. That was not a shadow, nor a reflection. It was a dark figure, with a human posture, but completely motionless, as if it were a cutout silhouette in the middle of the illuminated room. The strangest thing was that the light came from behind him, but he didn't cast a shadow on the wall. It was as if it absorbed the light instead of blocking it. When I managed to move, I closed the curtain tightly and sat on the edge of the bed, trying to breathe. I couldn't sleep anymore. The cell phone video only confirmed what I already knew. He appeared as soon as the light turned on, and disappeared with her, exactly at 3:23 a.m. The next day, I looked for the building's syndic. I said I was hearing strange noises in the apartment next door, and asked if there were any new residents. He just made a strange face, and replied that that apartment had been empty for months. The former resident had died, alone, in his own room. And the most bizarre, the body was only found because the light in the room was on for 3 days in a row, exactly at the same time, drawing the attention of those who passed by. Since then, according to him, the switch clock crashed due to some electrical failure, which would explain the light turning on by itself. But he never mentioned anything about figures. The next night, I decided to record again, but this time I left the camera pointed directly at the window of his room. At 3:17 a.m., like a clock, the light came on. The figure appeared again, motionless, in the same place. But this time she moted. He slowly turned his head, as if he were looking straight at my window. And even with the camera's zoom, I couldn't see the face. It was just a dark mass, but with a human form. When she took a step forward, I panicked and turned everything off. The feeling was that, if I kept seeing that, something bad would happen. I spent the rest of the night with the lights on. The next morning, I went to the door and asked to see the images of the security cameras of the hallway on the floor. The doorman was surprised, but let me see. I reviewed the records of the last few mornings, focusing on the light time. And there it was, exactly at 3:16 a.m., the corridor camera showed the apartment door opening by itself, without anyone appearing in the images. And at 3:24 a.m., she closed again. No movement, no living soul, only the door opening and closing. I asked to save the video, but the doorman said that the files were automatically deleted after 2 days. When I came back the next day with a flash drive, the video had already disappeared. I started losing sleep because of that. Every night I was waiting for 3:17 a.m. to arrive, trying to understand what was happening in that room. A part of me wanted to go there, knock on the door, try to find out if there was someone really living there. But the other part, the biggest, told me not to get involved. Even so, one morning, when the light turned on again, I took courage and went down. I stood in front of the apartment door for a few minutes, listening. Total silence. But the detail that gave me goosebumps was that, under the door, the light was oscillating, as if someone were walking inside. I hit 3 times. I hit harder. I put my ear on the door and held my breath. I swear by everything I heard a breath on the other side. Long dragged. I ran back to my apartment and locked all the doors. And there, from my window, I saw the shadow again. Only now, she was at the window of my room. It was a matter of seconds. When I blinked, it was no longer there. But I saw it. The dark shape on the inside. It seemed to smile. The next morning, I went to the door and asked about the resident of 705. The doorman made a strange face and said that that apartment had been empty for months, since the last tenant disappeared. He said that no one else had rented the place since then, and that even according to the administrator, the light was off inside. Literally, the power in the apartment was cut off. I asked to see the images of the corridor camera. What we saw made me freeze. At 3:17 a.m., I appeared at the apartment door as I remembered, but it was already open. And I had never noticed that. After that night, the light kept turning on at 3:17 a.m. for weeks. But I could never look directly at the window again. Until one day, the light didn't turn on anymore. I thought it was over. But then, a few days ago, I received a notification from my own security system. Movement detected, in the room. It was 3:17 a.m. Since then, I sleep with the lights on and all the cameras facing me. And even so, from time to time, I wake up feeling that there is something in my room. Watching you. Waiting. Have you ever seen a light turning on by itself in the middle of the night? Tell me in the comments. And if it's always at the same time, maybe it's better not to ignore it. I've never been the paranoid type with neighbors. In fact, I'm even very disconnected with these things. I live in a set of townhouses, and the one on my right always had a discreet resident, an older, quiet guy, who I saw from time to time taking out the trash or sweeping the sidewalk. But about 3 months ago, he just stopped showing up. No movement, no light on during the day. What intrigued me was that, even without seeing anyone leaving or entering at night, more precisely around 3:30 in the morning, I heard sounds coming from his house. Heavy steps, sometimes chairs dragging, other times a very low TV. It was strange, but I tried not to think too much. I thought he was just a loner with weird schedules. But things began to escalate in a way that could no longer be ignored. One of the dawns, I woke up with that horrible feeling of being watched. I looked to the side and saw that the window blind was ajar. And I swear by everything, there was a face staring at me there, standing still, as if I was trying to see the inside of my room. I couldn't see very well because of the low light, but he was definitely a man. I was frozen for a few seconds, trying to understand if that was real, or if I had woken up in the middle of a nightmare. I jumped up, closed the curtain, and stayed awake until dawn. The next day, I checked the backyard. There were no footprints or signs of invasion, but that image didn't leave my head all day. The next night, I refused to sleep. I stayed in the living room, with the lights off and only a slit of the curtain open. It was 2:45 a.m. when I heard a slight creaking coming from the side of the house, as if someone was touching the gate. My heart raced. I lowered myself near the window and waited. Around 3:10 a.m., I clearly heard the sound of footsteps on the back porch. I got up very slowly, went to the kitchen, and took a knife. I live alone, and there was no reasonable explanation for that to be happening. I approached the back door, trying not to make noise, and that's when I heard the doorknob being turned, very slowly. I was paralyzed. The door was locked, but that attempt was enough to convince me that someone was really trying to get in. I called the police at the time. While I was waiting, I went to the security camera panel I installed a few months ago, a measure that I found exaggerated at the time, but which now seemed like the best decision I've ever made. In the back camera, I saw what seemed to be a man with a dark cap and coat, trying to force the door calmly, as if he already knew exactly where he was. The resolution was not good, but you could see that he moved with caution, like someone who didn't want to be seen. The police arrived about 7 minutes later. When they opened the front door and searched the house, they found the guy hiding in my hallway. He was down behind an armchair that is leaning against the wall of the corridor, as if he already knew the plan of my house well. The weapon he carried was small, but real. The police immobilized him right there, and it was only after they took the guy that I was able to breathe again. The most bizarre thing was when one of the police officers came back to ask me some questions and commented, "Do you have any relationship with him?" Because he knew exactly where the locks and the switch in his room were. I had never talked to my neighbor beyond distant nods. And even so, he was inside my house as if he had done that before. Later, when I went to review the recorded images, I noticed something that left me completely disturbed. In the previous 3 nights, around 3 in the morning, he had already approached my house. First he stood still at the gate, then on the balcony, and then finally he entered. This explained the sounds that I thought came from his house. It was probably him circulating mine. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't stayed up that night. And to this day, I find myself looking at the window at 3 a.m. just to make sure no one is there again. After the police took him, the following days were of pure restlessness. I changed all the locks, installed motion sensors and new cameras, but nothing seemed to give me a real sense of security. I went to sleep with the corridor light on and a baseball bat next to the bed. The strangest thing was knowing that, according to the upstairs neighbors, that man shouldn't even be there. Apparently, the real resident of that apartment had moved months ago, and no one knew for sure who the man was who was living there now. The real estate company confirmed that the property was empty, or should be. That's when an even more terrifying question began to arise. If he didn't officially live there, where had he come from? How did you manage to break into the apartment next door and stay there for so long without raising suspicions? And most importantly, why did he choose just my house? I delivered the footage to the police, and even today, I don't know if they managed to find any real information about him. The identity he gave was false. No real document. No known relatives. Nothing. After he was taken, I slept away from home for a few weeks. I only came back because I couldn't accept that he had done all that by chance. I started to review every detail of the previous weeks, trying to remember anything out of the ordinary, and I remembered something that froze me inside. A few days before the face appeared for the first time in the window, my back door was ajar in the morning, but I swore I had locked it the night before. At the time, I thought it was my distraction, but now I'm pretty sure he had already entered. Maybe he spent nights in there without me knowing. The part that torments me the most is thinking about everything that could have happened if I hadn't woken up that morning. What if I hadn't locked the bedroom door? What if he had something worse than a gun? The police said he had forged documents, a knife, and some printed photos of me. They didn't tell me anything else. I don't know if he was arrested, if he ran away, or if anyone else is involved. I just know that, since that day, I've never been able to sleep peacefully, especially when you get close to 3 in the morning. After that, I installed a camera in all rooms, including inside my room. I changed the latches, changed the locks, put a presence sensor alarm, but the truth is that the feeling of being watched didn't go on. For a while, every time the clock came close to 3 a.m., I was completely paralyzed, expecting to hear some noise coming from the window or the door. A simple snap of the living room floor left me on alert. There was a night when the corridor camera triggered the movement alert, but when I went to see the video, there was nothing. No image, just the sound of footsteps, as if someone had been walking from one side to the other. I don't know if all this was something isolated or if there is something darker behind it. All I know is that, since that dawn when I met that man inside my house, my life has completely changed. I never thought something like this could happen to me. I always saw this kind of story on the internet and thought it was exaggeration, invention, until it became the main character of one. I still wonder, how long has he been watching me? And worse, was he the only one? Nowadays, I can only sleep with all the lights on and reinforced locks. I never saw that man again. He was arrested and, according to the police, already had a history of invasion and strange behavior. But what scares me the most is the idea that he could have done something much worse if I hadn't woken up that morning. To this day, I don't know how he got in. The door had no signs of burglary, and I never left windows open. The police said maybe he had a key. But how? Where would he have gotten a copy from? Since then, I live with a kind of constant paranoia. Every time I hear a noise at 3 in the morning, my body freezes. I always look at the window, even if I unintentionally. And sometimes I have the feeling that someone is still watching me, even with the neighbor trapped. I've already dreamed of his face, standing there in the shade. I keep wondering how many people live similar situations, and don't even suspect. Because it all started with small noises, and I only realized it when it was too late. Have you ever had the feeling of being watched inside your own house? Have you ever lived something like this? Tell me in the comments. I've never been the fearful type. I always slept with the light off, headphones in my ear, without caring too much about the noises of the house. I live with my parents in a single-story house in the suburbs, in a very quiet neighborhood, one of those where everyone knows each other by name. My room is at the back of the house, and the window goes straight to a part of the backyard where there is only bust and a low fence. Nothing strange has ever happened around here, until that week when I started waking up at the same time, 3:04 in the morning. The first time, it was a very light touch on the window, like that noise that a branch makes when it hits the glass lightly. I looked, but it was all dark outside. I went back to sleep thinking that was all. But then it happened again the next night. Same noise, same time. Then I started to find it too coincidental. But what really made me freeze was when I woke up the third night in a row and saw clearly marks. For fingers a little blurred, as if someone had touched them from the outside. But the glass was clean the night before. And my window was always locked. That morning, I got up and went straight to look outside. There was no sign of footprints or anything broken, no loose branches. It was as if someone had managed to approach the window without leaving a trace. I talked on top with my parents, but I didn't want to look paranoid, so I just commented that the glass was weird. They laughed, said it must be dirt from the inside. But I knew it wasn't. And that night, before going to sleep, I cleaned the glass completely, and even took a picture of it, just in case. I put my cell phone to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. When the alarm went off, my heart was already racing. I lay down, trying to listen to something. And then 2 minutes later, I heard it. 3 light touches. Exactly like before. I got up slowly, without turning on the light, and approached the window. You couldn't see almost anything outside, just the silhouette of the trees with the light of the street pole in the background. But when I looked closely at the glass, the marks were there again. New. Fresh. And they were sharper, as if the fingers had been pressed harder. The next morning, I took my cell phone to school and showed the photos to my best friend. He was visibly uncomfortable, but also excited about the idea of investigating. He convinced me to install an old camera he had, those that record in a loop. The next day, I mounted the camera in the corner of the room, well directed to the window. At night, I did everything the same. I closed the window, locked it, cleaned the glass. I lay down with my heart racing and my cell phone in my hand, waiting for 3 o'clock. And it didn't fail. At 3:04 sharp, there were the same touches. I didn't even move in. I just waited for the camera to catch everything. In the morning, I could barely eat. I ran to take the card out of the camera and took it to the notebook. The video showed my dark room for hours, until at 3:04 something moved outside. The image was bad, but you could clearly see a hand appearing in the corner of the window. Just the hand. You couldn't see your face or body, nothing but that. And the strangest thing is that the fingers were too long. Something in that hand was wrong, crooked. My friend saw it with me and turned pale. We didn't say anything for a few minutes. He just closed the notebook and said, "Dude, this is not normal." That afternoon, I went to check outside the window with my father, pretending he had heard cat noises. I didn't say anything about the video. The grass there was slightly crumpled, as if someone had stood there for a long time. It didn't have clear footprints, but enough to make me even more restless. That night, I tried to stay awake again. This time, I left the desk light on, just to see if it surprised whatever it was. But at 3:04, the ringtones came back. 3 light touches, as always. I got up slowly and went to the window. I didn't open it. I just touched my eye to the side of the curtain. And there it was. The hand, glued to the glass. But this time, she moved slowly, as if she was trying to get my attention. I walked away, with my heart pounding in my chest, and locked myself in the bathroom. I waited until sunrise to get out of there. When I returned to the room, the hand had already disappeared, but the marks were there again, sharper, deeper. At school, I could barely pay attention to anything. I told my friend that I didn't want to record anymore, but he insisted. He said we needed to understand what that was. We put the camera back on. But that night, nothing happened. Not a sound. Not a brand. It was as if everything had stopped just because we were waiting. The next day, I reviewed the recording from end to end. No movement, no sound. Just me sleeping, turning sideways, breathing heavily. It was worse than seeing something. That total absence, as if that knew it was being observed, made me even more nervous. The next night, I took out the camera and tried to sleep like before. It wasn't even 3 in the morning when I heard the 3 ringtones. This time, stronger. And then a 4th beat came, drier, faster. As if he had been irritated by my delay. I got up with a knot in my stomach. I got close to the window and pulled the curtain at once. There was no one. Only the glass, and again the fingers marked there, wet, as if they were printed on the spot. I retreated and sat on the floor. I was shaking. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was some stupid neighbor playing? But who would do this for so many nights in a row, and always at the same time? And how would you explain the marks on rainy nights, or when I left the camera on? The next day I told my mother. She was scared, but tried to stay calm. She looked at me and said something that broke me at the time. "You know, it was right in this window that they found that man trying to break into a house a few years ago, right?" I never knew that before. That night, I locked the window, locked the bedroom door, and put a chair leaning against it. I was lying down with my heart racing, staring at the ceiling, just hoping to give 3:04. 3 touches, a silence, and then a stronger beat, as if someone was trying to provoke me. But what made me panic was the sound that came next. Steps outside the wall, slow, dragged, skirting the house. I couldn't move. I just stood there, motionless, sweating cold, counting the seconds until silence returned. When it dawned, the window was open. The lock had been forced. Since then, I've never been able to sleep peacefully. I installed railings, moved the bed, put cameras in every corner. But the worst thing is that, from time to time, in the quietest dawns, I still hear a weak, almost imperceptible sound of nails rubbing against the glass. I could never find out who or what did that. And to be honest, I'm afraid to try to find out. Now tell me, if you heard knocks on your window exactly at 3 in the morning, would you have the courage to look? I live alone in an apartment on the top floor of an old building, one of those that you hear everything. Neighbor dragging chair, dog barking, elevator opening. It never bothered me. In fact, I even got used to the sounds of the dawn. But in recent weeks, something started to make me uncomfortable. Around 3 a.m., I started to hear footsteps coming from the ceiling. Slow, spaced footsteps, as if someone were walking from one side to the other well above my room. At first, I thought it was something in my head, but the sounds were consistent. The strange part is that the apartment above mine is empty, under renovation, according to the syndic. No furniture, no residents, no electricity. I called the concierge after the 3rd night in a row hearing that, and the doorman confirmed. No one went up, no one went down, and the unit key is with the construction company. Even so, that night, the steps not only came back, but they became heavier. On Thursday night, I decided to stay awake on purpose, just to see if I heard it again. I put a chair near the bedroom window and stared at the ceiling, as if that was going to give me some answer. Around 3:03, the steps began. This time, they weren't just walking. It was as if they were dragging something, or someone. I felt a cold in my stomach that I can't explain. I got up and went to the apartment door, trying to hear better from the corridor. But as soon as I returned to the room, the steps started again. I did what anyone would do. I took my cell phone and started recording. I wanted to show the syndic, or to someone, any proof that I wasn't going crazy. But when I went to listen to the audio, nothing. Only the ambient sound of my room, no noise from the ceiling. Even though I'm sure I heard clearly. I stood there, standing, trying to understand what was happening, until I heard a dry crash, as if someone had jumped or dropped something heavy exactly on top of my bed, only upstairs. I froze, and for the first time, I was really afraid of sleeping there. The next morning, I went straight to talk to the building administrator. She confirmed once again that the upstairs apartment was empty, that no one had the keys except the construction team, and that the work was stopped indefinitely, including no return forecast due to lack of budget. I insisted. I asked her to come up with me and check together. We went up. The apartment was locked with a padlock on the outside. When she opened, the place was completely empty, full of dust and with no sign that anyone had been there recently. No furniture, nothing that explained the noises. I returned to my apartment even more confused. I started to wonder if it could be some kind of auditory illusion, the sound coming from somewhere else and seeming to be on the ceiling. But that night at 3 o'clock, I woke up with a different noise. They weren't more steps. It was a continuous sound, as if someone was rubbing something on the floor or on the wall. And then I realized that it came from the corner of my room, near the corner where the ceiling meets the wall. It was as if something was there, right there above me, following my movements. That same morning, I took courage and put an aluminum ladder against the balcony wall to climb to the top of the building. I just wanted to make sure there was no one hiding up there, even if it seemed absurd. But when I got to the roof, the entrance padlock was closed with chain and accumulated dust. There was no sign of footprints or any movement. I returned home with a chill in my spine, because the feeling was clear. Something or someone was above me every night, and there was no way to be explained in the conventional way. I started to leave the phone recording audio during the night. The next morning, I went to listen to the recordings, and around 3:02 a.m., I heard footsteps clearly. First slowly, then stronger, and finally, a heavy breath while above the microphone. It was as if something was standing on me, standing on the ceiling of my room, just breathing. I swear that breath was not from an animal or something mechanical. It was human. I lowered the volume with my heart racing and stopped the recording there. It was enough to convince me that there was something really wrong going on. The next night, I left all the lights in the house on and forced myself to stay awake until at least 4 a.m. I wanted to see if the steps would come back, if I could hear something clearly. And of course, at 3 a.m. sharp, they started. Heavy, dragged, as if someone were walking in a small space above my room. But this time, I heard something more. A metallic snap, as if something had been dragged or kicked. The noise echoed, as if it had come from inside the building's structure. That left me completely paralyzed. I went to the balcony to try to look up, even without knowing what I expected to find. The brightness of the city didn't help much, and the cell phone flashlight only reached part of the roof structure. But then, for a moment, I saw something. A shadow, fast, passing through the corner of the building. That couldn't be a cat. There was no light paw noise. It was a firm, heavy presence, like the steps I heard every night. I went back inside shaking, locked everything, and began to rethink whether I should continue living there. The next day, I went to the administration of the building again, more insistent this time. I told everything I had heard and seen. The caretaker went with me to the upstairs apartment, but as it was under renovation, the door was locked with a padlock. He opened and we went in. It was completely empty, without furniture, with nothing on the floor that justified those noises. And even so, the brands were there. Dark and dry footprints on the dusty floor, going back and forth in a straight line, as if someone walked there every night. The caretaker looked at me as if he didn't know what to think, and just said that he would lock it again and take a look at the cameras in the hallway. That night, I tried to sleep on the couch in the living room, as far away from the bedroom as possible. But at 3 a.m., the steps came back. Stronger. They didn't come from the ceiling anymore. They started on the ceiling, but then, it seemed like they were going down the walls. And then something that made me freeze with fear. I heard a knock on the front door. 3 spaced beats, dry. I waited a few seconds in total silence. Then the sound of something heavy crawling on the floor began, inside my door, as if I had already entered. I ran to the door with a kitchen knife in my hand, and opened it all of a sudden, but there was no one. Only the empty and silent corridor. I closed it again, locked everything, and sat leaning against the door, trying to control my breathing. When I finally took the courage to go back to the room, I realized that the light in the hallway of the building, the one that is on all the time for security, was off, and it only turns off with manual control downstairs in the general picture. That made me more tense. How could someone have done this without anyone seeing it? The next morning, I asked the administration for the images of the security cameras. I spent more than an hour looking at the files together with the caretaker. And that's when I saw it. At 3 o'clock sharp, the camera in the corridor on my floor crashed for 2 seconds. When he came back, he showed the door of my apartment ajar. But I swear I didn't open it. And soon after, the corridor light went out. The janitor turned pale and asked me if I didn't want to spend a few days out while they changed the locks and swept. I accepted it right away. But until today, every time I wake up at 3 a.m. for no reason, I get the feeling that there is still someone walking over me. After that day, I never went back to sleep completely peacefully. I changed apartments a few months later, but the time was engraved in my head. Every time the clock ticks 3 o'clock in the morning, my body reacts as if it were reliving it. I started to lock all the doors with extra locks, installed an alarm, camera, and always leave a light on. I never found out who or what was making those noises, but I'm absolutely sure I wasn't alone on that floor. If you live in an apartment apparently empty on top, you hear steps where there shouldn't be anyone, and always at the same time, pay attention. It can be just your head, yes, but it may also not be. Not every dawn noise is innocent, and not every void is really unoccupied. Watch out for the signs. Sometimes, ignoring what seems strange can be expensive. I moved to this house a little over 2 months ago. After the divorce, all I wanted was a quieter, secluded place where I could just be at peace for a while. This house in the countryside looked perfect. It is about 20 minutes from the city, surrounded by the fours and without nearby neighbors. The first days were silent, even too much. At first I thought it was great. I worked from home, made my meals in my own time, without anyone telling me what to do. But soon loneliness began to weigh. Still, it was better than fighting every day with someone who barely looked at your face. The beats started in the second week. Always around 3 in the morning. It was as if someone gave 2 or 3 knocks on the back door very soft. It didn't look like an attempt to break in or anything. Just beats. The first time, I thought I had dreamed about it. On Monday, I already started to be suspicious. I got out of bed, went to the kitchen with a knife in my hand and checked the locked door. When it happened again the next night, I installed security cameras. I turned on the motion sensor and left the cell phone ready to receive alerts to any sign of activity. I thought that with this I would be able to get whatever it was that was doing this. But that's when things got even stranger. The next night, I woke up to the sound of the same beats, 3 slow, spaced touches. I picked up my cell phone at the time and looked at the camera app. No alert, no movement recorded. The door appeared there, motionless, with no one around. I got up with my heart racing. I checked everything again in person. It was locked. I leaned my ear against the door. I only heard the weak wind outside. I went back to bed trying to convince myself that it could be some animal, or even the structure of the house making noise with the temperature change. But deep down, something didn't make sense. The sound was very specific, as if someone knew exactly where and how to hit. The 4th time, the knocks were accompanied by something even stranger. The door was slightly ajar. I was absolutely sure that I had locked it before going to sleep, as I did every night. But there she was, just leaning, swinging with the icy breeze of the dawn. No sign of burglary, no fingerprint, no mark. I reviewed the camera images again. Absolutely nothing. As if no one had passed by there. I started to doubt myself. Was I forgetting to lock it? Was I freaking out alone in that house? Or was there something, or someone managing to get in without being seen? After that, I started to lock all the doors more carefully. I went to sleep with a chair leaning against the back door, as a form of improvised alert. I also bought a portable alarm, one of those that go off if the door is opened. I wanted anything that would give me a warning before something happens. For a few days, everything was silent. No beat. No strange signs. Until one morning, the alarm went off. I jumped out of bed in a jump, my heart beating so hard that it felt like it was going to come out of my throat. I ran to the kitchen and found the door open. The chair on the floor. No sign of forced entry. I turned on all the lights and went out with the flashlight to check the back of the house. The security camera still didn't show anything, as if it had failed right at that moment. The sensor had been activated, but there was no image, no movement detected. That gave me a different fear deeper. I started to think that maybe it wasn't a person, or that it was someone with some kind of knowledge that I didn't understand. Every night, my sleep became lighter. Any creaking of the floor left me on alert. I got to the point of sleeping with a knife under the pillow. And the worst, I've never been able to catch anything. Only the signs that something or someone was there. The following week, I decided to change the position of the cameras. I put one of them facing directly to the back door, with night vision activated. I also started recording the audio of the kitchen environment. I wanted at least proof that I wasn't going crazy. And then, on a rainy dawn, the sensor fired again. This time, I ran straight to the monitor and was able to see the recording in real time. The video showed the handle moving by itself. Nothing more than that. No shadow, no silhouette. Only the handle turning, very slowly, until the door opens. I was paralyzed for a few seconds, without the courage to move. I think what scared me the most was the absolute silence. Not even the alarm rang this time. And the audio recording didn't capture anything either. It was as if something, or someone knew I was recording. That night, I couldn't go back to sleep. I sat on the kitchen floor, with the knife in my hand and the light on, until the day dawned. When it dawned, I reviewed the entire outdoor area. There were no footprints, clay marks, or signs of invasion. Just the feeling that something had really entered there. Something I didn't see, but I knew exactly what I was doing. In the following days, the tension only increased. I started installing motion sensors inside the house, especially near the doors and windows. I started to lock all the doors with extra locks, even those that I used to leave unlocked. And yet, at 3 a.m., the beats and the sound of the moving doorknob continued. One of those nights, I heard something worse, a scratch on the door, as if someone was trying to force the entrance. My heart raced, but when I lit the light to check, nothing was there. I couldn't tell anyone about it for a while. I thought they would think I was crazy. But one night, I decided to stay awake, hidden in the living room, with my cell phone ready to record. The clock marked 3 o'clock sharp, and as always, the weak beats began. I stood still, trying not to make noise. Suddenly, the back door opened slowly, and a shadow was projected against the light of the corridor. I couldn't see the face, but I could feel the purest fear of my life. The shadow stayed there for seconds, then disappeared in the dark. After that, I called the police, who made a round around the house and the neighborhood, but they found nothing or anyone. Even so, they recommended me to be attentive and be careful. Since then, the beats have stopped dead. The back door is still locked, but I can't help but think about what could have happened that night. The silence that followed was almost as scary as the beatings. To this day, I can't explain what happened in that house. I've never seen anyone, nor did I find a concrete answer. I just know that when the clock shows 3 a.m., my body is still tense, waiting for something that never came back, or that may still be there waiting for me. If you've been through something similar, be careful. Sometimes, what seems impossible can be closer than we imagine. My wife and I lived in a small house on a quiet street for a couple of years. We never had any problems until a few days ago, when the house alarm started going off out of nowhere, always in the middle of the night, around 3:17 in the morning. At first, I thought it could be some defect in the system, but the worst thing is that this had been happening every night, always at the same time and for exactly 4 seconds. This was already starting to make us tense, because no one could explain why. One of these mornings, after one of these occurrences, I decided to take a look at the security system records. There was no strange movement in the house, no invasion, nothing out of the ordinary. The only strange thing was that the front door sensor was the only one that recorded activity, and only for those exact 4 seconds. My wife and I started to reinforce all the locks, but even so the alarm kept going off, and this happened every night, always at the same time. After about 3 nights like this, I started to get really worried. I couldn't tell if it was someone trying to get in, or if it was some technical problem, but the bad feeling only increased. One night, I decided to stay awake and watch the front door with a radio in my hand, hoping to see something. The house was completely silent, only the noise of the clock and the dim light of the lamp in the living room. At 3:17 o'clock, the alarm went off again, and I noticed that the doorknob moved slightly, as if someone was trying to open it. I stood still with my heart racing. I called the police, but before they arrived, the noise stopped and the door was motionless again, as if nothing had happened. The police came, searched the perimeter, but found nothing or anyone. When I asked if they could analyze the security system in more depth, they said they had no way to explain that strange pattern. Since then, every time I go to sleep I have a strange fear that someone is there, watching the house, and that they may never know who or what is really messing with the front door at 3:17 in the morning. The next night, I tried to install extra cameras near the door, thinking that at least I would get an image, even if blurry, of who or what was there. But, to my surprise, the cameras simply didn't record anything at the time of the alarm. I checked later and the images at that time were corrupted, as if someone had deleted or interfered with them. I got even more tense, because this didn't seem like a common technical problem. The next day, I told some friends what was happening, and one of them suggested that maybe it was some kind of bad joke, or even an attempt at psychological harassment. But the problem is that no one has ever tried to enter or left signs of burglary. Just that strange noise, and the alarm going off exactly at 3:17, always for 4 seconds. This made me think that maybe it was something more sinister than simple vandalism. That same night, I decided not to turn on the alarm and just watched through the window, hoping to see something strange. The silence was almost total, until exactly at 3:17, I heard the click of the alarm that was not on, a sound coming from the front door. I ran to the door, but nothing was there, just the uncomfortable feeling of someone having been there. It was the moment when I realized that it was not something I could just ignore. So I decided to spend the night awake, and with my cell phone in my hand, to record anything strange. The hours passed slowly, and I tried to convince myself that it was just paranoia, until around 3:17, the cell phone vibrated, a notification from the security system. I ran to the computer and saw that the door sensor had been activated for exactly 4 seconds. But when I looked outside, there was nothing, no sign of presence. And the worst, it seemed like someone was playing with me, leaving clues, but never really showing up. The following nights, I tried to figure out some pattern or logical explanation. I noticed that the front door sensor was always the same one that triggered, never the back door or any window. This made it clear that whoever or whatever was there was focused on that specific entrance, as if he wanted me to know that he was watching me. I even thought it could be some technical problem, but the fact that it was always at the same time, and at the same time, made me more and more restless. I decided to install extra cameras, hoping that they would capture something real, a person, an animal, anything. However, nothing appeared in the videos. It was as if the presence that activated the sensor was invisible to the cameras, but not to the alarm system. It was too disturbing to be just a defect. I couldn't sleep well those weeks, and, even after everything suddenly stopped, I could never explain what really happened. The strangest thing is that, after a few weeks, the alarm simply stopping, out of nowhere. I kept monitoring the system for days, hoping something would happen again, but the house was silent. Even so, the feeling that something was wrong never left me. Sometimes I caught myself looking at the front door, wondering who or what would have triggered that sensor, but I never got answers. To this day, I don't know if it was a technical failure or something much scarier. What makes me even more uneasy is that no one else in my family believes what happened. They think it was something in my head. But I felt, heard, and lived all that. I don't recommend leaving your alarms on in the middle of the night if you don't want to lose sleep with something inexplicable. That night, after deactivating the alarm for the umpteenth time, I stood still looking at the front door, kind of waiting for something to happen. The house was completely silent, just the sound of my own heart beating in my head. That's when I noticed something strange. The doorknob was slightly moved, as if someone had tried to open it, but gave up. I hadn't done that, and no one else was home. I stood still, not knowing if I should go out to check or just call the police. I ended up choosing the middle ground. I took my cell phone and called the police without taking my eyes off the door. When the police arrived, they found nothing out of place, no signs of burglary. But I knew there was something wrong, because that stirred doorknob wasn't there before. The feeling of invasion remained, and to this day I can't explain what happened that morning. The next day, I started to pay more attention to the details of the house. I realized that some things were out of place, an open kitchen drawer, a glass that was not on the same table where I had left it. This made me even more uneasy, because no one else had entered there. The idea that someone could have invaded my house and been there, without me noticing, began to consume me. I decided to install extra cameras and motion sensors, especially on the front door and around the house. That same night, while trying to sleep, the alarm went off again at 3:17 a.m., just like before. I ran to the cell phone and saw that the door sensor had been activated for 4 seconds. But in the images, no one appeared. The silence of the house returned soon after, and I stood there, afraid and confused, not knowing what to expect. That morning, after once again being woken up by the alarm at 3:17 a.m., I decided not to ignore what was happening. I took my cell phone and, silently, opened the security system application to check the front door. To my surprise, the notification showed the door being opened, but no image captured someone entering or leaving. I was staring at the screen, trying to understand if it was some kind of defect, but everything seemed very real. The alarm turned off exactly after 4 seconds, as if someone was playing with me. I couldn't squint my eye anymore after that. Every time I heard the alarm, a strange cold took over my body. The next day, I spoke to a security technician to take a look at the system, and he said there were no apparent flaws. He just warned me to be careful and be aware of any strange movements. To this day, I don't know what really happened in that house that morning, but one thing is certain: it never stopped, and I could never find out who or what was there, opening the front door exactly at 3:17 a.m. The following nights were a mixture of fear and tiredness. I couldn't turn off my head from that door I opened by myself. I even put an extra lock, but the alarm kept going off, and the sensor was still activated at exactly the same time. The strangest thing is that nothing was out of the house, no window or other door seemed to be being used. It seemed that the front door was the only access point, but at the same time, no one appeared. I didn't know if I was going crazy or if there was really someone messing with my things. One night, I decided to stay awake to see if I caught the intruder in the act. I hid near the door, with my cell phone in recording mode, and the light off so I wouldn't be seen. It was 3 a.m., 3:10 a.m., and the clock seemed to run slower than usual. When it hit exactly 3:17 a.m., I heard the sound of the door opening. My heart raced, but I couldn't see anyone. It was as if something invisible was there, moving the doorknob. I wanted to run away, but I was still, just watching and feeling a fear that I can't explain. After the door closed by itself, silence reigned again in the house, but my heart was still beating hard. I sat there for a while, trying to understand what had happened, but I couldn't find a logical explanation. The next day, I went to the police to report the facts, but they said that without concrete evidence, they could not do anything. This only increased my feeling of vulnerability. I returned home with the feeling that I was being watched, even though I was alone. I started researching about similar situations, and found out that I wasn't the only one going through something like this. Many people report strange experiences involving sensors that fire on their own, doors that open for no reason, and all this at specific times during the night. This only reinforced my fear and my curiosity. I don't know what happened that night, but to this day I get my foot behind when I see the clock approaching 3:17 a.m. Have you ever been through something like this, or do you know someone who has experienced something similar? Stay tuned, and if this happens to you, don't ignore it. It can be a sign that something is very wrong. I never cared much about these bizarre reports that people share on the internet. I always thought most of it was exaggeration or invention. But what started happening to me in the second semester of college completely changed my way of thinking. It was around March, and I had just moved to a small apartment near the campus. It was practical, cheap, and you could walk to classes. The first weeks were quiet. I was focused on my studies, meeting new people, normal routine. Until, on an ordinary Tuesday night, my cell phone rang at 3:14 a.m. I wake up easily with any noise, and that made me jump out of bed. I looked at the display, unknown number. I thought it was a deception or some prank. I answered it with a hello, a little sleepy, and from the other side came only a heavy breath. Nothing else. I listened for about 5 seconds, waiting for someone to speak, but it didn't happen. Just that muffled, rhythmic sound, as if the person were very close to the microphone. And then, out of nowhere, the noise of something scratching, like a fabric nail or microphone being scraped. I hung up at the time. I tried not to think too much and went back to sleep. The next day, I kept wondering if someone from my group of friends had taken my number and tried to play a trick on me. I asked in the college group, but no one knew anything. They even joked that maybe it was the spirit of some disapproved matter. I laughed together, but that stayed in my head. The night came, and I went to sleep around midnight. And there it was again, at 3:21 a.m., the cell phone rang. Same unknown number. I answered again, more angry than scared. The same heavy breathing, then silence, and again that scratching sound, only longer. Almost as if the person were scratching a wall. This time, I hung up quickly and went straight to check if there was something wrong with my cell phone, like some bug. There were no detailed records of the number. It was only listed as restricted. I thought about blocking it, but because it was a hidden number, I didn't have that option. I started to get paranoid, so I decided to save the times and record the sound on the next call. In the following nights, the phone calls continued. Always between 3:10 a.m. and 3:30 a.m. And it was always the same: touch, silence, breathing, and the damn scratch. When I went to show the recorded audios to my friend from the IT course, he turned pale and asked, "This number, do you know who it was from?" I explained to him that I had no idea, that the number was hidden. That's when he asked to see the operator's records, something I hadn't even thought of looking at. The next day, we entered the operator's website and pulled the history. When we saw the full number that originated the calls, my stomach freezed. It was Mateus' number, a guy in our class who had disappeared 2 years before, after a weekend trip. No one has ever found out what happened to him. The police investigated, but nothing was found. He just disappeared, and the case cooled down. I stared at the number for a few seconds, with that cold in my stomach that only appears when something doesn't make any sense. His phone should have been deactivated, or canceled, or, I don't know, out of use for a long time. I called his mother on Facebook, with a lot of fear, and she answered super shaken. When I explained about the calls and the number, she cried and said that that was Mateus' old number, and that it had been canceled by the operator after the disappearance. The strangest part, she said she still has the device at home, turned off, stored in a box with his things. That night, I couldn't sleep. I was staring at my cell phone, waiting for 3:30 in the morning, wondering if that would happen again. And of course it happened. At 3:24 a.m., the phone rang. Unknown number. I attended trembling, and on the other side, only heavy breathing the same way as before. But this time, it seemed a little closer, sharper. It was as if the person was very close to the microphone. And then came that scratching sound again, a metallic sound, like a nail scraping on an aluminum surface. I lasted about 10 seconds before turning it off. This time, I saved the audio of the call and sent it to a friend who understands sound editing. He took the file and tried to clear the noise. The next day, he sent me an enlarged excerpt with a voice message. It was low, almost inaudible, but you could hear someone whispering, "Where did you leave me?" My blood frosted. I had no idea what that meant. We had nothing to do with Mateus' disappearance. We were normal college classmates. He was more friends with other guys in the course. But that whisper took away my floor. I went to Mateus' old profile on social networks. He was inactive since his disappearance, but what scared me was that a new publication had been liked by him less than a week ago. I clicked on the name. The profile was there, with a photo, all the same, but without any recent activity other than that like. I sent a message, of course, asking who was using the account. The next day the bill was gone, as if it had never existed. That's when I started to think that this wasn't just a coincidence, that maybe someone was trying to say something. The paranoia began to grow. I installed cameras in my apartment and activated motion alerts. I started sleeping with the door locked inside, something I never did. One morning, I received another call, this time at 2:07 a.m. I attended trembling. Then after a few seconds, a dry sound came, as if someone had touched the microphone to their throat and said my name, whispered. That made me drop my cell phone and run to the door to check if it was locked. It was. But outside, I swear by everything I saw someone's shadow passing in front of the door camera, but the system didn't record anything. The next morning, I went straight to the building's monitoring center. I asked to see the external recordings of the previous night, especially between 2 a.m. and 3:30 a.m. The doorman was a little suspicious, but released. And what we saw made me freeze inside. There was an exact moment, at 2:08 a.m., when one of the external cameras, just the turn to my floor, turned off for 4 seconds. Only her. The others worked normally. Then it went back to normal, as if nothing had happened. The doorman was silent, and so was I. I asked for a copy of the video, but he said that only the administration could authorize it. At that time, I couldn't sleep anymore. I started to leave my cell phone in airplane mode during the night, but that didn't prevent the calls. When I called again in the morning, there were always missed calls between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. Sometimes 1, sometimes 3. I tried to block the number, but it always changed. A different ending, but always with the same area code and the same initial sequence. That's when I decided to tell a friend from college, who also knew Mateus. When I mentioned the number and time, he turned pale. He said that, 2 weeks before Mateus disappeared, he had also begun to receive these calls. That made me even more paranoid. I started rummaging into Mateus' old profiles on social networks, but everyone had been inactive for years. Until I found an old comment, left by a profile with a different name, but the same photo he used at the time. The comment was in a forum post about strange frequencies during the night. That gave me goosebumps. The profile said something like, "If you're hearing this between 1H and 3:30H30, don't answer. Just watch. They just want to know if you're paying attention." I went to sleep that night without getting that out of my head, with my cell phone turned off and locked in the drawer. Even so, I woke up with the feeling that my cell phone had vibrated. It was 3:17 in the morning. I went to the drawer, and it was on, with the screen on, and a call ended 3 minutes ago. I didn't remember turning on the device, not even to have taken it out of the drawer. The call record was there, with the same number as always, only now the call recording had been saved. I don't know how this happened, but trembling, I pressed play. For a few seconds, I didn't hear anything, and then that breath came back, and then a voice low, as if speaking inside my head. "You will also disappear." I locked all the doors and windows at that moment. My heart felt like it was going to come out of my mouth. I spent the rest of the night sitting on the bedroom floor, with the lights on and a knife in my hand. With every slightest noise, I was startled. When the sun finally rose, I decided I needed to talk to someone. I went to the campus to look for teachers or anyone who remembered Mateus. Most just said that he left the course and disappeared, but an advisor from the psychology department pulled me out of the corner and said that he had been complaining about the same things: calls, strange sounds, bad feelings during the night. She was the one who showed me a report that he had delivered just before disappearing. It was not part of any work, just a loose text. In it, Mateus described everything I was also going through. In one of the excerpts, he wrote, "They only come when you notice." The advisor said that he seemed to be getting paranoid, but that it all started after a seminar he presented on sleep disorders and prolonged exposure to the frequency of 18 Hz, an inaudible sound that can cause discomfort and hallucination. I didn't know what to believe anymore. I only knew that the calls continued, and I felt more and more that it was not only psychological. That night, I decided to record with my cell phone turned on in airplane mode, using only the recorder. I put it on the table, turned to the bed, and left it there. I slept with one eye open and the door locked. When I woke up, the cell phone was on the floor, the screen cracked. But I still had recorded it. When I heard the audio, I almost threw up. Around 3:11, the sound of heavy breathing begins, just like what I heard on the calls. Then you can hear what seems to be a whisper, but I couldn't understand what it said. In the end, there's the noise of the chair dragging, and I slept all the time. I didn't mod the chair. That mess by itself. After that, I left the dormitory and went to live with my parents for a while. I never received calls again. But sometimes, I wake up at 3 a.m., for no reason, with the feeling that someone is looking at me. I could never explain what happened. Maybe it was some mean joke. Maybe not. I just know that that seemed too real to be a coincidence. And to this day, if my phone rings at dawn, my heart stops for a second. If you've ever been through something similar, or had calls that seemed impossible to happen, comment here. Maybe it wasn't just with you. I was never one to believe in these things. I've always had a very logical head, especially after I became a mother. You can't afford to freak out with any noise when you're raising a child alone. But there was something that started to happen, and that to this day I can't explain. It all started in a very subtle way. Around 3 in the morning, almost every night, I woke up out of nowhere with the feeling that someone was watching me. I turned around, looked around the house with my cell phone in hand, and everything seemed to be in place. Until one night, while I was getting up to go to the bathroom, I saw a shadow stopped at the end of the corridor. At the time, my first instinct was to think it was my son. The silhouette was exactly his height, and for a second I thought that maybe he had had a nightmare and was there looking for me. I called his name, a little sleepy, but the figure didn't answer. When I went to his room, he was lying down, facing to the side, breathing heavily, sleeping soundly. My heart froze, but I tried to convince myself that I must be daydreaming or seeing things because of the low light. The next night, I was awake on purpose. I refused to sleep until past 3 in the morning. I wanted to see if that was going to happen again, or if it had just been a delusion of my tired head. I sat on the sofa in the living room, with the lights off, only with the TV on mute. When the clock marked exactly 3 o'clock, there it was. The same silhouette standing at the end of the corridor. Only this time, I saw it more clearly. It had no facial features, no clothing color, or anything. It was just a dark, static form, as if it had been cut out of the dark. I got up slowly, but before taking any step, the shadow simply disappeared. He disappeared, as if he had never been there. I began to wonder if I was going crazy, but the mother's instinct spoke louder. The next day, I installed a simple camera in the hallway, one of those that you connect to your cell phone. I thought that way I could put an end to this business for good. I was anxious all day, wanting the night to come, and when it finally arrived, I put the cell phone in front of me and waited. I said goodnight to my son as always, locked the house, checked all the windows and lay down. But this time, I left the camera recording activated. At 2:59 in the morning, I woke up with a dry noise, as if something had fallen to the floor. I took my cell phone and opened the transmission of the corridor camera. At first, I didn't see anything. The corridor was completely empty, only the dim light of the lamp illuminating a part of the wall. But suddenly the silhouette appeared. It emerged very little by little, as if it were being revealed by the darkness itself. Stop, motionless, in the same corner as always. Only now she was a little closer to the camera. I strained. I had my cell phone in my hands, not knowing what to do. I tried to zoom in on the image, and when I did that, the shadow moved. It wasn't a common move. It didn't look like a step. It was as if she had gotten a little closer to the lens, like a blur expanding. And then, she disappeared from the image. I jumped out of bed, ran to my son's room, and he was sleeping soundly. No sound, no movement inside the house. But what gave me goosebumps was realizing that the corridor door was ajar. I was absolutely sure that I left it closed. After that, I spent the whole day reviewing the previous recordings. I went back days and days in the camera files and realized that the shadow always appeared around 3 o'clock in the morning, but in slightly different positions. Sometimes in the left corner, sometimes near the bathroom wall. What made me more tense was that, in some records, she seemed to be closer to my bedroom door. I had never noticed this before. It was as if she was getting a little closer every night. A pattern that I could only see when I started looking at everything in sequence. I decided that night I was going to stay awake and try to understand what was happening. I put my cell phone on the tripod, facing the corridor, and sat on the edge of the bed with a flashlight in my hand. At 2:58, the silence of the house was almost suffocating. Suddenly, the corridor seemed to darken beyond normal. I looked at the screen, and there it was again. That silhouette standing at the end of the corridor. But this time, something has changed. The camera began to lose focus, as if something was interfering. And for the first time, I felt something strange, as if there was someone watching me from inside my own room. I turned my head slowly, trying not to make noise. The room seemed normal, but there was a strange cold in the air, as if some window was open. When I looked at the cell phone screen again, the shadow was no longer stopped. She was moving, not walking. It was more like I was sliding towards the camera. The movement was so slow that it looked like the image was frozen, but it wasn't. Every second, she got a little closer, until she occupied almost the entire lens. Then, out of nowhere, the screen went black. The camera had stopped working. At the same time, I heard a pop on the wood on the floor, right outside my room. I froze. My son kept sleeping soundly, and I couldn't decide whether to go to him or stay there. I took the phone and opened the camera app again, but it was still offline. I went to the door, touched my ear, and silence. Total. Just the sound of my heart fired. When I finally had the courage to open it, I didn't see anything in the hallway. But the light of the lamp was off, and I had left it on. I never leave that corridor in the dark. The next morning, I checked everything again. The cameras, the locks, even the house's power system. There was no electrical failure, no sign of invasion. But the filming of that dawn had disappeared. The file simply didn't exist. What I had seen before was automatically saved in the app backup, but the video of the approaching shadow didn't appear anywhere, neither in the clouds nor in local storage. It was as if someone had deleted it, or as if it had never existed. The only thing left was the feeling that all that was not a coincidence. Since then, I put extra locks, motion sensors, and a new camera with external backup. And every night, at 2:50, I wake up alone, as if my body already knew what's coming. I look at the dark corridor of my house and ask myself, is this thing still here, waiting? Because deep down, what scares me the most is not her showing up again. It's the silence that comes before. The kind of silence that only those who have seen something like this recognize. Have you ever been through something inexplicable during the night? Share in the comments. Maybe you're not the only one.